Today I want to talk about how Ohio State forced Nick Saban to change. And all that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, I want to talk about Nick Saban and how his short stint at Ohio State forced him to change. And I don't know that it's forced is the right term. Nick Saban wanted to field a dominant secondary. And there's some backstory that we need to get into that I get from Monty Burke's biography about Nick Saban, which is called The Making of a Coach. Saban, The Making of a Coach. And it's really good. And you should go pick it up because I'm probably going to tell you a lot about it anyway. And it's fascinating. But let's start with 1981, which is about the time when Earl Bruce, who was head coach at Ohio State at the time, had enough of Nick Saban. And I'm going to read from a passage in the book to try to illustrate this point. So bear with me on this. Ohio State held a preseason ranking of number 11 going into the 1981 season. The team's main concern was with its young, inexperienced defense. Saban felt that the team had been issued loud and clear a warning sign in the previous year that they were not ready for the new school passing attacks fashioned by a few teams in the Big Ten. In 1980, a mediocre 3-5-1 Illinois team had come to Columbus late in the season and pushed around the defense, and in particular, Saban's unit. Again, he's secondary coach. Dave Wilson, the Illini quarterback, threw for a record 621 yards in a game, which the Buckeyes still somehow managed to win 49-42. By 1981, Saban wanted to change the way his secondary worked to combat these pass-heavy attacks. Bruce did not, which led to confrontation. On the field, Saban wanted to do things in coverage that were a bit more sophisticated, looking for a better way. Steve Szabo, the defensive line coach, said. Sean Gale, he of the 85 Bears, remembers that Saban was really an independent thinker and was constantly pushing to try to do things new in his secondary. Saban also wanted to start recruiting a new breed of safety. Earl, this is a quote from Szabo, was sort of back in the 1970s. He felt like a strong safety should be a guy like Jack Tatum, a big guy. But Nick believed the safeties had to be multi-talented guys, had to be able to play the pass in a zone or even man-to-man coverage. You can see now the coming of a Minkah Fitzpatrick and a D. Milner and the star position in particular in Saban's defense today. Saban, entering his 10th year as a coach, now had his own firm beliefs about how the game should be played in the secondary. He was not shy about voicing those opinions, even if they contradicted those held by his head coach. Off the field, things between Earl and Saban began to get a little intense. Nick made some statements a couple of times during staff meetings that were really offensive to Earl. When he said them, you could hear a pin drop in the room. Imagine someone doing that to Saban. That's what it was like at the time to try to do that to Earl Bruce. In the 1981 season, Saban's fears about his secondary were realized. After winning their first 3 games, the Buckeyes lost 2 in a row to an unranked opponent, Florida State and Wisconsin. Even subsequent wins exposed the team's flaws. In a 45-33 victory over Purdue, Saban's secondary gave up 516 passing yards to Boilermakers quarterback Scott Campbell. The lone bright spot of the season for the defense came against arch-rival Michigan when Saban was allowed to craft a game plan for his secondary designed to stop Michigan's receiving star, Anthony Carter. Nick did a good job neutralizing Carter. Szabo said the receiver was limited to 52 yards and 4 catches in the Buckeyes intercepted 3 passes in a 14-9 upset of the 7th-ranked Wolverines. But check this out. Though Ohio State had managed to share the Big Ten championship, the season had been a disaster for its defense, which had long been the strength of the team under Hayes. The 1981 squad gave up 253 points and a whopping 3,278 yards passing, which made them the worst passing defense in Division I. Think about that. Nick Saban was once the secondary coach for the worst pass defense in football. At the time, Denny Frizel was the defense coordinator. He told the Louisiana Shreveport Times, everybody was all over our pass defense, and that was Nick's. The fingers were pointed at him. The media and the fans were murdering him. Despite these pressures on and off the field, Saban stayed tight with his players. So much so that he would hang out with them and even told many of them not to go into coaching because there was no money in it at the time. You got to remember, he's making about $20,000 to coach at Ohio State as a assistant. And as an assistant at Navy, he'd make even less. And as an assistant at Michigan State in 1983, he made $30,000. Like his first job at Kent State paid $18K to coach DBs. All right. Those are the kind of instances and the kind of ways in which Nick Saban developed his defensive philosophy. And many of us think of Nick Saban as a defensive coach first. And a lot of it has to do with him playing the position of defensive back in college and playing alongside the likes of guys like Jack Lambert, among others. Gary Pinkel was also on his 1972 Kent State team, along with Gerald Tinker, who won a gold medal as a part of the 4x1 meter relay and was a wide receiver. Think about Nick Saban lining up against a dude that wins a gold medal in the sprints. That's what the 1972 Kent State Golden Flashes were, and where he really started to develop his idea for what defensive football should look like. As a matter of fact, one of the first guys he worked for was Don James, who was later the head coach at Washington and helped them win a national championship. He went on to work for guys like George Perlis, who helped him understand what the 4-3 over defense was and how it was supposed to go. But I think his one stint at Ohio State, where he was responsible for the worst pass defense in the country at a time when he was fighting his head coach about trying to just evolve with the times, is really important for us to understand how Nick Saban has become the person he is. And as we're going into the Rose Bowl with Alabama playing Notre Dame, and as I expect Alabama to win a national championship, another one, right? I think it's interesting that we point out these ways in which this man has developed over the past nearly 50 years, his idea of what football is and what it can be in the future. This is part of the RJ Young Show book club, where I am basically telling you bits and pieces of what I've learned about Nick Saban in this biography by Monty Burke. It's really good. It's called Saban, The Making of a Coach. Go check it out. I'm going to keep quoting from it, keep talking to you about it. We're going to get into more of Nick Saban as a recruiter, some really fascinating stories from his childhood at Monaga in West Virginia, and how everything comes back to who raised him and how he was raised. All right, that's it for me. Deuces.